Our scripture today comes from the letter of 2 Corinthians in the New Testament, the 9th chapter, and the first few verses of that 9th chapter. And we hear these words for us this morning. Now it is not necessary for me to write you about the ministry to the saints, for I know your eagerness, which is the subject of my boasting about you to the people of Macedonia, saying that Achaia has been ready since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. But I am sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you may not prove to have been empty in this case, so that you may be ready, as I said you would be. Otherwise, if some Macedonians come with me and find that you are not ready, we would be humiliated, to say nothing of you, in this undertaking. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to go on ahead to you and arrange in advance for this bountiful gift that you have promised, so that it may be as ready as a voluntary gift and not as an extortion. May we share a word of prayer together. Loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Maya Angelou said about giving, among its other traits, giving has the potential to ignite passion in the giver. I've been with St. Andrew Christian Church almost 18 months. And there's a few things that in my observations of my time in this congregation, though as unusual as the time has been in this 18 months, some things that I think underneath that COVID pandemic era that have continued to shine through, that have been a consistent part of who you've been, who we have been as a congregation. One of those is the values that shape who we are as a community of faith. I name those values every Sunday during the welcome. Race and class and sexual orientation and age and gender identity, ability, thought. How many times when a church says, we welcome everyone here, and then some congregation says, but. There's no comma, other phrase, other declaration, other way of saying, but if only. And those values have been consistent. Something, secondly, I think is really important for this congregation is the amount of passion and energy and excitement that there is for all that happens in the life of the church. Whether it's a study group that gathers on Wednesday morning, a handful of people that gather at Center of Grace and provide once a meal to those that otherwise wouldn't get a meal. If it's working on the care of creation and working on better, more efficient ways for us to care for our environment just on the stamp of our property, let alone outside of the property, of what it means to be a caretaker of the world that God has entrusted to us. The teaching of our smallest children, the nurturing of our youth and helping them create minds to wonder and dream about possibilities of how they can thrive and be in the world. Social gatherings, study gatherings. And there's not been anything that I participated in that hadn't come with great fervor and energy and excitement. And I'll tell you, it only excites me even more. And I'm kind of already an excitable person. But you get me excited about that, and I get even more excited about stuff. And then the great piece that you kind of add on to all of that is this is a church that pushes the edges of our comfort zones. About the time we get settled in, this is a nice little place. Someone will say something, you what? What? And you have to think about it. You have to discern about it. You have to kind of question, do I believe that? Do I not believe that? Well, they believe that. I believe something different. That's okay. But it's pushing, constantly challenging us to think differently and expand our possibilities of how God works in the world. How easy it is for us to kind of plant some stakes around ourselves and think, I've got this foundation around me and nothing's going to shake it. Until someone says something that does. And then we have to evaluate what our foundation really is as a person of faith, as a person in this church. I think those are some of the hallmarks, some of the great components of this congregation and how it continues to inspire and enliven people. Now, when Paul was writing to Corinth, this was a church that was chock full of all kinds of issues and problems. Most of 1 Corinthians is a response to questions that Corinth had. And so 1 and 2 Corinthians really is kind of a misnomer. We're probably talking about 3rd and 4th Corinthians when you really think about it, because these letters are in response to other letters that have been sent to Paul. And there's probably other letters that aren't accounted for that are part of this dialogue. And it seems like every time there's a question to answer, or Paul's response to a question is some issue, some conflict, some dynamic that's going in the church that Paul needs to respond to. And the more letters a church got, the more stuff the church had to work through. But there's one thing Paul knew about Corinth that they got more than anything else, was the power of generosity. The power of making a difference in another person's life. You go back to 1 Corinthians in chapter 12, and Paul goes through this litany of gifts. These litany of spiritual gifts and lifting up all these things that Corinth has within it. I mean, they're chock full of gifts and chock full of talent. And Paul's trying to get them to celebrate all that they have and are as a congregation. Now, in 2 Corinthians, by the time we get 2 Corinthians, which I call 3rd or 4th Corinthians, in chapter 9, Paul is trying to tap into the passion and enthusiasm that Corinth has for making a difference in the world. And he goes, I'm going to send an advocate to you, and you've been talking, and I'm kind of saying it's like I'm Paul talking to the church in Corinth. You've been talking about making this gift. And Paul had this idea of making this large gift on behalf of many of the Gentile churches to show of their connectedness and their intertwined connections to the wider church that Paul had been working on with Peter and others. And there was this gift that was coming. And Paul's, I'm going to send someone in advance to collect this gift. You've made a promise to this gift, and I'm going to make sure that we celebrate that promise. And it's almost seems a little heavy-handed at first. I'm going to send someone out to you to make sure this gift happens, because when we get ready for the gift, if the gift doesn't happen, that would be kind of embarrassing. So I'm going to come out in advance and get this gift so that we have it ready to celebrate. One of the things that's really important, and Paul knows this, is that sometimes when passion wanes, passion can move into loyalty. We can think about the possibility of something, and when the possibility of something wanes, it becomes obligation. And so Paul's intention of going early is to tap into the passion and possibility of what that church can do, rather than its loyalty and obligations of what it's supposed to do. There was a group of men in a coffee shop talking about their families. And the conversation began centering around their children. And they started complaining about their children. Do you know what kids cost these days? And they start talking about dental bills and extracurricular activities and school supplies and allowances and all these movies they want to go to and the video games they've got to buy. And then it only gets worse, because then there's cars and car payments and car insurance. And it says, well, it even gets worse than that when they get older. They go to college and there's tuition and boarding and student loans and all these expenses. And they're all talking and kind of complaining about all the expenses of their children. And there's one individual in the group that kind of stayed silent the entire time until the end of the conversation. And he was more of a reflective person in the group. And he finally spoke up, and they kind of turned because he hadn't said anything at all. He goes, "Why did you have kids? Why did you have kids? What would it be like if your kids weren't with you anymore? Would you complain about the cost?" He said, "I try to look at my kids as the best possible things this world has to offer. I want to give them every opportunity to thrive in the world. And if my pocketbooks are empty because of it, the world is better for it." How easily we can slip into obligation and loyalty and complain about those things rather than paying attention to the possibilities and the thriving and the nurturing that can happen on the front end of what it means to give to something. And this church is a powerful place. The values I've already named, the passion that's already there. And the cool thing about passion is that passion kind of has this contagious spirit to it. When I get passionate about something, then my hope is that somebody else gets passionate about something. And when someone else gets passionate about what they're passionate about, I want to encourage them and celebrate their passion for their thing. I mean, this church is chock full of passion. On Wednesday night, had the opportunity to go to a training for Interfaith Hospitality Network. We had 13 people from St. Andrew show up for that. You can kind of get excited about some of this stuff, this work that we're doing. And Jody is passionate about that work. I'll tell you, she's not only going to the training, she's not only here when we do this, she's volunteering every week at that place, helping think about people and their transition of once not homeless, now homeless, and trying to get back into a place of thriving and possibility in their life again. Now, the church thrives not only if Jody is thriving, but I get over there and help Jody thrive with her. And we're doing it together. All of a sudden, her energy goes way up. She's not out there in a silo somewhere wondering, does anybody care about this? Had breakfast with Rich Beyer this week, and he goes every month and helps serve a meal at Center of Grace. And the dynamics have changed quite a bit with COVID. But you kind of start talking about Center of Grace with him, and his eyes just kind of light up. And I said, "Can I come some night and do that with you?" He goes, "Well, sure, that'd be great." And he just kind of get excited about that. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, we have passions all over the place. And we are called in church like no other organization in the world is that we can ignite each other's passion under the guise of we are doing holy work and changing the world around us. Now, if you want to see another person that's filled with passion, look at Avis Smith over here to my left. You get her wrapped around anti-racism work for indigenous people. I once said in a thank you note today, Avis, you're a force. I mean, she is a force when it comes to those things. I want to be around Avis when she's doing those things because it makes me a better person. But the list goes on about the things that this church can do and accomplish in the world. There's a quote that actually has no attribution of who said the quote, but I think it's an awesome quote. I was looking around wondering why somebody wasn't doing something. And I realized I was that somebody. Now, we reach this time of the year, November, when there might be a little mailing will come your way. With a little card with a promise for a future gift. Kind of sounds like something Paul's talking about. And we can either look at that invitation and that card as a loyalty and obligation, but I'd rather you consider that more like the opportunity for this church to thrive in ways it hasn't yet imagined what was possible. Everything we're doing is just on the cusp of things. I remember 20 plus months ago, riding in a car from this church to the airport with Alan Barkema at the close of an interview that I had in the search process. And Alan said to me, I think St. Andrew is on the cusp of some significant things. I believe that. I mean, it's kind of like E.F. Hutton. When Alan speaks, you kind of want to listen to what he has to say. But I think all of us could say something along those same lines as, I believe the church can do this. I believe we can do this. I'm not asking you to empty your pocketbooks, make your life crazy because you've given so much to the church, but you never know what's possible until we stretch ourselves a little bit. When we lay the foundation of giving in the life of the church, it's not about, well, what do I think I can do? It's more about what's possible when we do it together. It's not thinking about your pledge as what I am giving to the church. It's thinking collectively about what we are doing together to enliven the life of the church. There's a scientist that did some work on the brain. Said the brain is a fascinating thing. Says when a person is brave enough to believe in another person, rather than being critical and thinking what's possible, looking at less at self-interest and looking more at the community. When a person gives in that kind of mindset, that person says the brain begins to activate the section of the brain that celebrates joy. Kind of a cool thing. When there is generosity in play, the part of the brain that's activated is the joy part of the brain. Let the joyful generosity begin. Amen.